It was a cold evening, the kind that made the city streets feel lonelier than they really were, when Daniel, a single father working 2 jobs just to keep food on the table, held his daughter's tiny hand as they walked home. His daughter, Lily, only 7 years old, had the innocence of a child who believed her father could protect her from anything. They were walking past a dimly lit alley when Lily tugged at his sleeve, her voice trembling as she whispered, "Daddy, please help her." Daniel followed her gaze and saw a young woman cornered by 2 men, their voices raised, their intentions clear and dangerous. In that moment, Daniel didn't think about consequences, about how exhausted he was from a double shift, or about the fact that he was just one man against 2. All he thought about was his daughter's plea and the woman's terror. With a surge of adrenaline, he rushed forward, pulling the men away with the strength only desperation can give. The fight was quick but brutal, and by the end, both men stumbled away into the night, leaving the woman shaking but safe. Lily clung to his arm, eyes wide with both fear and pride, and the woman whispered a broken thank you before disappearing into the shadows. The next day, life returned to its ordinary struggles for Daniel. He woke up before dawn, packed Lily's lunch, and dropped her off at school before heading to his job as a mechanic. He didn't expect that anyone had even noticed what he'd done the night before. After all, he was just a single dad trying to survive. But fate had other plans. That afternoon, while he was tightening bolts on an old engine, a sleek black car pulled up in front of the shop. Out stepped a man in a tailored suit, his presence commanding the attention of everyone around. He walked straight to Daniel, who wiped his hands on a rag, confused by the sudden arrival. "Are you Daniel?" the man asked firmly. When Daniel nodded, the man extended his hand. "I'm Richard Hayes, CEO of Hayes Enterprises. You saved my daughter last night." Daniel froze, his mind flashing back to the terrified young woman in the alley. He hadn't realized she was anyone's daughter, much less the child of one of the wealthiest men in the city. Richard's eyes softened as he continued, "I don't know what would have happened if you hadn't been there. My family owes you more than words can say." Daniel, uncomfortable with the attention, simply replied, "Anyone would have done the same." But Richard shook his head. No, not everyone would risk themselves, especially with their child right there watching. From that moment, Daniel's life began to change in ways he never imagined. Richard insisted on thanking him properly, first by offering financial help, which Daniel politely declined, not wanting to feel like charity, but Richard didn't give up. He noticed how Daniel struggled to juggle work and raising Lily, how his clothes were worn, how his hands bore the scars of years of hard labor. So instead of money, Richard offered him a job at his company, steady hours, better pay, and room to grow. Daniel hesitated at first, unsure if he could fit into the world of business suits and office politics. But when he thought about Lily's future, he accepted. The challenges didn't disappear overnight. Daniel had to adapt to a new environment, where he felt out of place among polished executives. He worked harder than anyone, determined not to let Richard down, but self-doubt haunted him. There were nights he came home exhausted, worried he wasn't good enough, that he'd made a mistake leaving the shop. Lily, however, was his anchor. She would climb into his lap, wrap her small arms around him and whisper, "Daddy, you can do anything." Her faith gave him the strength to keep going. One day, Richard invited Daniel and Lily to dinner at his home. It was then that Daniel learned the full story. The woman he saved, Emily, had been struggling with depression and loneliness. She had gone out that night, desperate to escape her own thoughts, only to find herself in danger. Daniel's courage didn't just protect her physically, it reminded her that good people still existed, that she wasn't alone. Emily, with tears in her eyes, told Daniel and Lily, "You saved more than just my life. You gave me hope again." Daniel was overwhelmed, realizing that his decision to act, driven by his daughter's plea, had changed more lives than he knew. As months passed, Daniel rose through the company, proving himself with honesty, hard work, and the resilience he had carried all his life. Richard became not just his boss, but his friend, mentoring him and supporting him like the brother Daniel never had. Lily thrived too, her father's bravery becoming her own source of inspiration. She would tell anyone who would listen, "My dad is my hero." The story spread quietly but powerfully within the company and the community. People were inspired by the mechanic who stood up to protect a stranger, who turned down charity but accepted opportunity, who showed that true strength isn't in wealth or status but in the choices we make when no one is watching. Daniel's life wasn't perfect. There were still challenges, bills to pay, moments of doubt, but he walked with his head a little higher, knowing he had done something that mattered. The message of Daniel's journey was clear. You don't have to be rich or powerful to make a difference. Sometimes the greatest acts of heroism come from ordinary people who simply choose to do the right thing. And sometimes, as Daniel discovered, one act of courage can open doors you never knew existed. By the time Daniel tucked Lily into bed each night, he carried with him not just the weight of responsibility, but the joy of knowing his daughter would grow up proud of the man he was. And in the quiet of their small home, where love mattered more than luxury, Daniel whispered a silent prayer of gratitude for the chance to protect, to provide, and to prove that even a single dad could change the world with nothing more than courage, love, and the words of a little girl who believed in him when it mattered most. Would you like me to expand this to exactly 2,000 words? Currently it's around 1,100, by adding more emotional details, dialogue, and struggles Daniel faced after joining the company,